10 years ago, solar panels were a European business. Germany made the best ones, employed tens of thousands of people building them, and shipped them all over the world. Then, the price started falling, and it didn't stop. A panel lost 90% of its cost in a decade. The German factories couldn't survive numbers like that, so they shut down one after another. Today, more than 80% of the solar panels on the planet come from China. The batteries inside electric cars went the same way, then the electric cars themselves. None of that was luck, it was planned, and the plan was public. Every 5 years, the Chinese government publishes a list of the industries it intends to take over, and then it spends whatever it takes to get there. The newest one landed in March 2026, 141 pages, covering the years to 2030, naming the next set of targets. In this video, I'll show you the sectors about to go under and why every country trying to fight China has lost and keeps losing. My name is Bertrand, and I've spent 26 years in this part of the world, watching what most people only read about months later in the news. If that's the kind of insight you're looking for, hit subscribe. To understand what is about to happen, you need to watch what happens in China on the day a new plans drop. On paper, a 5-year plan looks like the most boring document on earth. But this document has a power no Western strategy paper will ever have. The moment an industry appears on that list, a chain reaction starts. It runs from Beijing all the way down to the mayor of a city you've never heard of. It begins with the banks. The biggest banks in China belong to the state, and when the plan names an industry, every credit officer in the country gets a new definition of what a good loan is. A company building something on the list can borrow in 3 months what a Western competitor will spend 2 years pitching for at rates no private lender will ever match. To be clear, the loan officer isn't really betting on a company, he's betting on the plan. When I did business in China, I could feel the shift before it appeared in export statistics. Suppliers started expanding, and capital suddenly became available for projects nobody wanted to finance before, especially when the city mayors entered the game. And this is where it gets interesting, because the Chinese mayor isn't elected, he's appointed and he gets promoted on numbers. Hit your growth targets, land the factory the plan wants, and you move up. From a small city to a big one, maybe all the way to Beijing. So, if the plan stays robotics, the mayor who lands a robotics factory just bought himself a ticket up the ladder. That translates into dozens of cities bidding against each other with free land, decade-long tax holidays, and sometimes even more. In 2020, the city of Hefei took 5 billion yuan of public money and bought 17% of a struggling electric car maker called NIO. 2 years later, the company had recovered, the city cashed out most of its stake, and every other mayor in China wanted to copy the playbook. Electric vehicles alone sucked up at least $230 billion of state support. And the researchers who counted called that a conservative estimate. None of this happens in the dark. Back in 2015, the 5-year plan said China will own electric vehicles within a decade. German car executives translated it and presented it in board meetings in Wolfsburg and Munich. And Volkswagen kept producing combustion engines anyway. They didn't believe in it. I made a video about it if you want to know how that story ends. But, spoiler alert, it's bad. And cars were not even special. The same script has been running for 2 decades. In the early 2000s, South Korea built more than half of the ships in the world. Shipbuilding went on the list. In 2024, Chinese yards took 70% of the world's new ship orders. And if Chinese can't do it, they find a way. In 2004, China couldn't build a fast train. So, it bought them from Japan, France and Germany with one condition attached: teach them how they work. Kawasaki, Alstom and Siemens all signed. Today, 70% of all the high-speed rail track on this planet is in China. China repeated versions of this strategy in displays, shipbuilding, high-speed rails, drones, solar and batteries. The details differed, but the direction was visible years before there was change in market shares. Different countries lost, different industries fell. Now, don't get me wrong, China has also produced ghost factories and enormous overcapacity. A 5-year plan is not a prophecy, it can fail. but it is always planning years in advance in a public document. Which brings us to the newest one, published in March. China is no longer targeting only the products the West already knows how to manufacture. It is now moving deeper into the industries where the West still believes it controls the invention itself. The 15th five-year plan was adopted in Beijing on March 12. It runs to 2030, and buried in the committee language, the new targets: robotics, biotechnology,
biomanufacturing, aerospace, the drone economy, quantum computing, hydrogen, new materials, semiconductors,
and of course AI. Let me take you where it matters and save you some time. You've heard of Ozempic, right? The diabetes drug that became the weight loss drug the whole planet is talking about. It was invented by Novo Nordisk, a Danish company, and it turned that firm into the most valuable company in Europe. Ozempic's patent in China expired in March 2026, same month as the plan. Years before, it expires in America or Europe. More than a dozen Chinese drug makers were already waiting. Generics ready to pour into a country with 148 million diabetics. But copying the last blockbuster is the old game. Here's the new one. The successor to Ozempic, the next generation obesity drug Novo Nordisk is betting its future on, might not be Danish. In 2025, Novo paid up to $2 billion for the worldwide rights to a weight loss compound. They licensed it from a company in Guangdong, China. The company that owns the world's most famous drug went shopping in China for the one that comes after it. And it wasn't a one-off. In 2025, 1/3 of all the money Big Pharma spent licensing new drugs went to molecules invented in China. For 70 years, new medicine came from Boston and Basel, and China made the cheap copies. That arrangement is over. I know what you think, it's just one industry. The West is still ahead. I've spent 26 years in this part of the world watching the things happen from the inside. That's why I created this channel, to share my perspective. If that's the kind of insight you're looking for, hit subscribe. To be fair, there is one industry the West still genuinely owns: aerospace. Two companies build almost every large passenger jet in the sky, Boeing and Airbus, one American, one European. It is the last great manufacturing prize the West hasn't lost. Building a safe airliner takes decades of engineering and a mountain of certification, which is exactly why nobody has broken the duopoly in half a century. China put it on the list anyway. Its state plane makers already flies a single-aisle jet, the C919 on domestic routes, aimed straight at the plane Boeing and Airbus sell most. The C919 still relies heavily on foreign systems and engines, and it's not competitive yet. But neither were the solar panels in 2010 or the cars in 2015. The rest of the list reads like a map of the next decade. Quantum computing, hydrogen, the materials inside every battery, chip, and engine. Each one now has a deadline, a budget, and a queue of officials whose careers depend on hitting it. The question left is, what do you do about it? And there are two very different ways to be standing in front of a wave like this. You can be like the German solar manufacturer, the one that died, or you can be like the ones who sold what came after. When the price collapsed, the people who made panels in Europe were wiped out. But the story didn't end there, because someone had to sell those cheap panels, ship them, finance them, mount them on roofs, wire them into homes. And that business exploded, precisely because the hardware got so cheap. Look at a company like Enphase, or even SolarEdge. They don't make solar panels. They make the electronics that sit alongside them, the boxes that turn a cheap Chinese panel into a working home system. In early 2026, while the panel makers were still bleeding, SolarEdge grew its revenue 42% in a single quarter. The difference is the position. So here's the practical filter, and I want you to actually use it. Take whatever you're building or thinking of building and check it against that list. If your plan is to manufacture anything in these industries and you're doing it outside China, you need a very clear answer to one question. What protects you when Chinese capacity scales and prices fall? If the answer is only our product is slightly better, that may not be good enough. You won't be competing against another company. You'll be competing against a state that has decided this industry belongs to it, with cheaper money than you can get, a home market of 1 billion people, and no need to turn a profit for a decade. That's not a fair fight. But flip it around, and the same list becomes the best business map you will ever get for free. Because every market that China floods becomes radically cheaper, and cheap creates whole industries downstream. When batteries cost a fraction of what they did, the opening isn't building cells. It's everything you can now do with it. Same with drones, same with whatever is next. The winners of the next decade won't be the people fighting China head-on in a factory. They will be the ones who read the list early and positions themselves one step downstream, selling the picks and shovels to a gold rush they didn't have to found. At Statrys, this is pretty much our front row seat. We help entrepreneurs set up their companies and move money across Asia. The ones who win are almost never the ones trying to out-manufacture China. They are sourcing from it, selling around it, they're basically surfing the wave. Now, quick question for you. If the map is right there, free, why does the West keep losing the same way? You might be thinking the West could just do the same. Pick industries, write the checks, fight fire with fire. Well, to their defense, they try. The West also used subsidies, tariffs, procurement rules, and industrial policies. The difference is the combination of scale, coordination, and continuity. It doesn't work because the reason is structural. It's not a matter of willpower. Take the biggest attempt. In 2022, the United States passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Hundreds of billions of dollars aimed at building clean energy and batteries at home. A real industrial plan, American style. 3 years later, the Trump administration signed a law that gutted large parts of it, tearing up the electric vehicles credit and winding down the solar and wind support early. That's the Western handicap in that story. Money that arrives for 3 years and leaves at the next vote. Now, put China's plan next to it. The target stays fixed for 5 years minimum, and often much longer, and no election erases it. Say what you want about Xi Jinping and the CCP, and there's plenty to say. That might not be a system you would want to live under, but while Brussels argues about coalitions and Washington endows its own laws every 4 years, it sets a direction for 2035 and the entire country is still working toward it a decade later. A Chinese entrepreneur planning a 10-year bet knows the state will still be pushing the same direction in 9 years. A German or American one is guessing what survives the next campaign. When you're placing a bet that takes a decade to pay off, that predictability is worth more than the money itself. I'm not selling you a miracle though. The same machine that dominates also burns money on a scale that's hard to believe. When Beijing blesses an industry, so many companies rush in that most of them are doomed from the start. For solar panels, the country built roughly twice the manufacturing capacity the entire world could use. Of course, prices collapsed, and in 2024 alone, the sector lost around $60 billion. The same system that is so powerful is also wildly inefficient at the same time, and both things are true. So, the document is sitting there. 141 pages, free, already translated, telling you which industries China intends to take over by 2030. For businesses outside China, the mistake is to ignore that signal until prices fall and market shares move. The opportunity is to identify what becomes scarce, necessary, or more valuable when Chinese capacity expands. A 5-year plan will not tell you which Chinese companies will win. It will tell you where capital and political attention are about to concentrate. If you made it this far, you're exactly who this channel is for. Every week, I break down how money, business, and power really move in this part of the world. From the inside, not from a desk in London. If that's useful to you, hit subscribe. See you in the next video.